Whew. We are like 50 feet away from the summit for peak. Make a prediction now, guys. What's going to happen? What makes sense for the story? Think about the characters. Think about what has been said by the different characters and just what makes sense for the growth and the purpose of these characters. Okay, let's continue. You go, Sanjo said weakly. I'll start back down. You can't go down the north side. The Chinese are waiting for you. That I will get around them. He and I both knew this wasn't true. I looked down the mountain. Two other climbing parties had topped the third step and were winding their way up the dragon's tail. They must have gotten a late start or had a run-in with problems along the way. If the weather held, they might be okay. You can never tell who the mountain will allow and who will not. Sunjo will not reach the summit without your help. Just remember Zopa's words. Let's go. I pulled Sunjo to his feet. We started back up with each little step. Sunjo seemed to gain strength. 25 feet, 20, 17, 10. I stopped and stared up at the summit pole, then turned around and looked below. What's the matter? Sunjo asked. I looked back at the summit pole, then pulled my goggles down and looked at Sunjo. Do you know the date? He shook his head. May 13th, I said. So? I think this is as far as I'm going. What are you talking about? The summit is only a few steps away. What does the date have to? Tomorrow's your birthday. You have a reason to be here, Sunjo. An important reason. Your future and your sister's future. I don't have a reason for being here. I'm heading back down the north side. Sunjo stared at me like I was crazy, and maybe I was at that moment. But the decision I had made during the last few feet felt right. I didn't want to be the youngest person to summit Mount Everest. Sunjo's father died saving my father. Reaching the top would save Sunjo and his sisters. With the money from the equipment endorsements he would receive, they would be able to go back to school. It is too much, Sunjo said. It's nothing. Come with us down the south side into Nepal. I shook my head. If I climb down the south side, everyone will know that I reached the summit. The only way down for me is the way I came up. But I do have a favor to ask. Recess time. I do have a favor to ask. I took off my pack and found the moleskin. The yellow prayer flag with the blue mountain was hidden in a pocket in the back of the journal. I took it out and handed it to him. When you get to the top, tie this to the pole. Of course, but you need to go. Sunjo put his thick gloves together in the Buddhist way and bowed. Thank you, Peak. I will not forget this. We're running out of time. I'll tape you getting to the top, and there's a record of the climb. Sunjo quickly explained what I was doing to Yogi and Yash. At first they looked shocked. Then they both broke into broad smiles and clapped me on the back. Yogi is coming with you, Sunjo said. I'll be all right. He insists, Sunjo said, and so do I. Fine. We all shook hands and hugged. Then I recorded Sunjo and Yash taking those last 10 steps. When they reached the summit of the highest mountain in the world, they took off their masks and smiled and waved for the camera. Sunjo tied my yellow flag to the pole, then he and Yash crossed into Nepal. Man, that's pretty good. All right, down the mountainside. So just like our plot diagram, we're having falling action now. I don't remember much about the trip back to Camp 6. We stumbled into camp well after dark. I vaguely remember Yogi hooking up a fresh oxygen tank to my mask. But after that, it's a blank. I didn't have any trouble sleeping. I know that, and I didn't have any regrets about not reaching the summit. I woke up with spit frozen all over my face and the worst headache of my life. The oxygen tank was empty. I grabbed another one and cranked it up to 6 for a few minutes, then got rid of most of the headache. or that got rid of most of the headache. Yogi and I were eager to get down and check on Zopa. We bypassed Camp 5 and went directly to Camp 4. As soon as we stepped into camp, we were confronted by one of the Chinese soldiers. He was dressed like a climber, except for the pistol strapped to his waist. In pretty good English, he asked who we were and what we were doing. "My name is Peak Marcello and this is Yogi Sherpa," I said. We took supplies up to Camp 5 and were heading back down to base camp. He called Captain Shek on the radio and they had a long conversation in Chinese. "The captain wants to talk to you," the soldier said and handed me the radio. "This is Peak Marcello," I said. "Josh Wood's son?" "Right." "What you doing on mountain?" "Like I told you, I helped take some supplies to Camp 5. Josh is taking a climbing party up tomorrow." "But you leave mountain!" "What are you talking about?" I asked, enjoying myself immensely. "I'm up at Camp 4." "You have big argument with your father." "Oh, that. He told me that he wasn't going to let me try for the summit. It made me mad, but at least he let me get as far as Camp 5. "What about other boy?" "What other boy?" "Sunjo." Him," I said. "He's in Nepal," which was the truth. "I don't believe. I have soldier bring you and Sherpa back to base camp." "Whatever," I said, and I handed the radio back to the soldier. I had another long conversation in Chinese, but I knew what this one was about. The other soldiers had gathered around the radio and were listening intently. The one with the radio finally signed off and shook his head with resignation. "You don't have to escort us down," I said. "We have orders," he said. "That's fine with me, but we're going to base camp. Where else would we go?" About that time, Josh came on the radio asking for me. The soldier handed me his radio again. "Is everything okay, Peak?" "I guess. What's the matter with the captain?" "I don't know. Anyway, we're heading up to ABC tomorrow, so I guess we'll see you on our way to base camp. Thanks for helping Yogi get those supplies up to Camp 5. I could see him and the others gathered at HQ monitoring the call from Captain Shek. "No problem," I said. "Is there any way you'd reconsider giving me a shot at the summit?" "We talked about that, Peak. The answer is no. Maybe next year or the year after, when you're a little older. You're not ready." Out, I handed the radio back, trying to look disappointed. The soldier looked at me for a moment. "Do I have your word that you are going down to base camp?" I held up my right hand. "You have my word. All I want to do right now is crawl into my tent and go to sleep." He nodded. Yogi and I headed over to Zopa's tent, not sure what we would find. What we found was a note. "Peak. I left Camp 4 yesterday. All is well. I will see you on the road. Zopa." I was glad to hear he was okay, but the note freaked me out. It was addressed to me. The plan had been for me to top the mountain with Sunjo and cross into Nepal. How could Zopa possibly have known what I was planning to do? I didn't know what I was planning to do until I was 10 feet away from the summit. Pretty cool. Yogi and I woke up early and left Camp 4 before anyone was awake. I wanted to give the soldiers an out so they could tell the captain that we had left before they were up. When we got to ABC, we were met by more soldiers. They were in uniform and looked uncomfortably cold. Once again, I was given a radio with very angry Captain Shek on the other end. "You leave Camp 4." "Right. Without soldiers." "We left before light. We didn't want to wake them. Besides, we know our way down to base camp. We don't need an escort." "Soldiers at ABC escort you." "Fine." The two soldiers picked for duty were delighted to be leaving ABC. We ran into Josh and his clients as they were arriving at Camp 2. They must have left base camp early because they had made good time. Josh took me to the side out of earshot of the Chinese soldiers. "Did you make it to the summit?" he asked quietly. "No." "What happened?" "Ran out of steam." "No worries," he said. "What about Zopa, Sunjo, and Yash?" "Zopa got sick and didn't get past Camp 4. I don't know where he is now. I was hoping that you'd seen him." Josh shook his head. "I'm sure he's fine. Probably slipped into the porter camp at night and is laying low. I hope so. And Sunjo and Yash, he asked. As far as I know, they're in Nepal. What? I told him about Zopa's plan. He broke into a broad grin. That son of a... Captain Shek is going to flip when he finds out. Topping the mountain, he shook his head, then turned a little more serious. How far did you make it? Above Camp 6. Well, you made it a lot farther than most people. I'll take you next year or the year after. We'll go up on the Nepal side. After Shek finds out about Sunjo, I'm never going to get a permit to climb on this side again. When does Sunjo summit? 1:32 p.m., May 13th, a day before his 15th birthday. He put his hand on my shoulder. I wish it could have been you. No worries, I said. We go, one of the soldiers said. In a minute, Josh said, then turned back to me. Shek is going to detain you when you get to base camp and ask you some questions. Thaddeus will be there with you. In real life, Thaddeus is a lawyer and is fluent in Chinese and Chinese law. You'll be okay. I was going to be okay, but not for the reason he thought, and I was not going to join him on another Everest climb. I'd had enough of 8,000-meter peaks littered with corpses. I'm going home, I said. What do you mean? Back to New York. We'll talk about it when I get back down. I won't be there when you get down, I said. What's the hurry? You wouldn't understand. Try me. Okay. I want to be home for the twins' birthday. By the look on his face, I was right. He didn't understand. I haven't missed one yet, I said. Josh stared at me for a moment. Well, I guess Thaddeus can get you a ride to Kathmandu. We go now, the Chinese soldiers shouted. We're just about finished, Josh said irritably. I guess you'd better go. Yeah, well, sorry it didn't work out. Josh put out his hand. Actually, it did work out, I said, shaking his hand. I'll see you around. I started following the soldiers and Yogi, then turned back and shouted, Right when you get a chance! Josh looked at me and grinned. I might just do that. We got to base camp about 5 o'clock. Captain Shek, several soldiers, and Thaddeus Bowen were waiting for me. They weren't interested in Yogi and let him go into camp. When we got to Shek's headquarters, the first thing he did was dump everything in my pack onto a large table. Then, just like my New York detective a century ago, he examined the contents item by item. He found nothing of interest except for the digital camera Josh had gotten for me, Josh's video camera, and my moleskin. He flipped through the moleskin, found mostly blank pages, and put it back down. The cameras he pushed to the side of the table. Sit, he said. There was a single straight-back chair. I sat. He asked me the same questions he had asked me up at Camp 4, but this time he had a tape recorder going and a soldier taking notes. I answered the questions in the exact same way. When we finished, he told me I could repack my things. I began stuffing things back in, but when I got to the cameras, the captain stopped me. Not those, he said. You have no right to take anything, Thaddeus said. Cameras will be returned after we look. Well, there better not be any damage to them when they're returned, Thaddeus said. Some lawyer, I thought. Glad he wasn't defending me when I was in front of that NYC judge. I'd be in jail right now. When we got outside the building, he whispered, Was there anything incriminating on those cameras? It's a little late to be asking that now, I said. But the answer is no. I took the memory card out and put in a blank one. Where's the memory card? Someplace safe. It was actually stuffed in my sock. I'm going to pause it there, guys. Exciting stuff. We got to see the climax of this story, the most exciting part. We got to see Peak really become complete as a character, make a change. It's really interesting. Really well done story. Probably going to be able to finish the story in the next video. See you then.